Uh, in our last morning word, I talked about the cure for racism starts when, as God has given us the revelation, His revelation of what He thinks about man and man's redemption. I want to share when a man or person received that revelation, how it changed them. Meaning this, you could be the rottenest, dirty, evil sinner, racist, but when you come into an encounter with God, it's going to change your perspective. It's going to change how you think. Now, in this chapter, in chapter 10 here, you remember it's about 10 years after the resurrection of Jesus. And pretty much the apostles they stayed pretty much to ministering only to the Jews. And one of the things we find out is that not only did they only minister to the Jews, they really didn't even think anybody other than the Jews could be saved. In other words, the non-Jewish person, the Gentiles, they didn't even think they could be saved. And that would come in chapter 11. And so God insists breaking the ice. Now, and first let me back up and say the difference between like Peter's ministry and Paul's ministry was very interesting. When God gave instructions to Peter and him, He says, "You're going to be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the uttermost parts of the earth." When He gave His instructions to Paul, He says, "Paul, you're going to be my witness to the Gentiles and to kings and the Israelites." In other words, He reversed the order. The reason why I said that is because the Jews never made it past the outer parts of the earth. Well, God now gives Peter this vision, and you remember in this vision it was all sorts of animals and reptiles and birds, pretty much everything the law of Moses said he couldn't eat. God said, "Rise up, kill and eat, Peter." And Peter says, "Not so, not me. I've never eaten anything unclean." And God says, "What I cleanse, don't you call uncommon." Now, Peter wouldn't understand this until he actually comes to a Gentile's house by the name of Cornelius. What is interesting about Cornelius, and let's read because this is Peter's response as he comes into Cornelius' house. And we also need to understand that Peter and them they didn't go into Gentile houses. They considered that to be unclean. If you even remember when the Pharisees brought Jesus before Pilate, Pilate had to come out to them because they didn't want to be clean. Now I got to stop and just poke fun at that for a moment. Think about that for a moment. Here they just framed a good man, lied, false witness, pretty much all of the big sins that they were not supposed to do, and yet they were careful not to go into the Gentile palace because that would be considered unclean. Oh, the utter stupidity of religion and man's religion. But I digress. Pilate had to come out to them, and that's why. And so they looked at that, and Peter did not want to go to Cornelius' house. He thought it was unclean. God had to give him a revelation. Now, what Peter didn't know, and this is very interesting because, you see, Peter's view of Cornelius was he was unclean. God's view of Cornelius was, you have a pure heart. You are accepted. I accept you because your heart is right before me. So many messages there that you can take comfort in this, that no matter what man thinks about you, think about this, that God accepts you. Here's Peter's response as he comes into this Gentile's house, this unclean house. And Cornelius tells him his experience. And now they're trading notes. Your vision, my vision, God is moving here. And this is Peter's response. Verse 34. Then Peter began to speak. Now I really understand that God doesn't show favoritism, but in every nation, the person who fears him and does righteousness is accepted with him. And that was Peter's revelation to change how he saw the unclean Gentiles. You don't ever have to worry about what man thinks. Worry about what God thinks about you. That's today's morning word. Have a blessed day. Till next time, I'll see you then.